Good evening, something is moving beneath West Texas, and it isn't just oil, not slowly, not quietly, but with a kind of patience that feels almost intentional, as if the ground itself has begun to forget how to hold its own weight. Out in the vast openness of the Permian Basin, where pump jacks nod endlessly and the horizon stretches without interruption, a silent transformation is unfolding. It doesn't announce itself with earthquakes or explosions. It begins subtly, a crack in the earth, a dip in the land, a place where the ground no longer feels solid beneath your feet. Then one day it opens, a hole, sudden, deep, unforgiving, and what lies beneath isn't empty. For decades, this region has been one of the most productive oil fields in the world. Thousands upon thousands of wells have been drilled, tapped, abandoned, and forgotten. Some were sealed, many were not. Others were plugged using standards that belonged to another era, an era that never imagined the consequences would resurface like this. Now those buried decisions are rising. Near the small town of Wink, Texas, two massive sinkholes have already carved themselves into the land. Locals call them Wink Sink Number 1 and Wink Sink Number 2. They didn't appear overnight, but they grew faster than anyone expected. What began as minor subsidence, barely noticeable, has turned into gaping voids that continue to expand year after year. Scientists monitoring the area using satellite radar have noticed something unsettling. The ground between these two sinkholes is weakening, slowly compressing, edges creeping inward. They're not just growing, they may be moving toward each other. And if they meet, the collapse won't just double in size. It could trigger a chain reaction beneath the surface, destabilizing everything around it. But Wink is only the beginning. Across more than 4,000 square miles of the Permian Basin, the ground is showing signs of distress. Subtle sinking, shifting layers, invisible pockets forming where solid earth once stood. It's not one sinkhole. It's a pattern, a system under strain. And the deeper investigators look, the more they uncover a troubling truth. Much of this instability traces back to a hidden network of abandoned oil wells, nearly 8,900 of them across Texas, classified as orphan wells, no owner, no maintenance, no responsibility, just relics of extraction left behind. These wells, some drilled as far back as the early 1900s, were once channels of immense economic power. But over time, as companies dissolved or moved on, the wells were sealed, often hastily, sometimes improperly, and occasionally not at all. What happens underground doesn't stay underground forever. Pressure builds, materials degrade, seals fail, and when they do, the results are unpredictable. In Upton County, on a quiet stretch of land known as Kelton Ranch, a family recently discovered something they never expected to find on their property. A sinkhole nearly 200 feet wide, filled not with water, but with crude oil. It formed around a well that had been plugged back in 1977. For decades, it sat unnoticed, until it didn't. The ground gave way, and what surged up wasn't just oil, it was a warning. Because crude oil doesn't rise alone. It often brings with it toxic gases like hydrogen sulfide, odorless at first, then suddenly overwhelming, and in high concentrations, deadly. These gases can seep into the air silently, affecting livestock, contaminating water, and posing risks to anyone nearby. The family at Kelton Ranch didn't receive a clear explanation, no immediate response, no definitive accountability, just a growing hole in their land, and the realization that something far beneath them had failed. They are not alone. Reports are emerging of wells thought to be safely sealed, suddenly erupting, not in fiery explosions, but in slow, relentless releases, oil bubbling up, gases escaping, soil collapsing inward as underground cavities expand. This isn't just environmental damage, it's structural uncertainty, the kind that doesn't stay contained. Roads can crack, foundations can weaken, entire sections of land can become unstable without warning. And because much of this activity occurs underground, the warning signs are often too subtle or too late. The agency tasked with managing these orphan wells, the Texas Railroad Commission, is facing a growing challenge. With thousands of wells to monitor and limited resources, the scale of the problem is becoming difficult to manage. Each well represents a potential failure point. Each failure point represents a risk, and the clock is already ticking. Scientists from institutions like Southern Methodist University and the University of Texas are now racing to map the extent of the subsidence using advanced satellite technology. Their findings confirm what many feared. The ground is not uniformly stable. There are zones, wide zones, where the land is slowly sinking. Not dramatically, not visibly, but consistently. And consistency in this case is what makes it dangerous, because it suggests an ongoing process, not a one-time event. A system that is still evolving, still shifting, still collapsing. What makes this situation even more complex is the geology of the Permian Basin itself. Beneath the surface lies a thick layer of salt deposits and changed remnants of prehistoric seas. Salt, unlike solid rock, is highly soluble and can deform under pressure. When exposed to water, it dissolves, leaving behind voids. Combine that with thousands of drilled wells, pathways that can allow fluids to move unpredictably underground, and you have a fragile balance. Disturb that balance even slightly, and the consequences can cascade. Water seeps in, salt dissolves, voids expand, the surface weakens, and eventually it gives way. It's a slow motion unraveling of the land itself, and yet life above continues as normal. Pump jacks still operate, trucks still pass, ranches still stretch across the horizon. To the untrained eye, nothing seems wrong, but beneath it all, something is changing, and it's not reversing. The question is no longer whether more sinkholes will form, it's where, and when, and how large. Because each new collapse doesn't just represent a physical hole in the ground, it represents a gap in understanding, a lapse in oversight, and a reminder of how long-term consequences can outlast short-term gains. There is no single fix. Plugging wells is expensive. Monitoring land requires constant data. Identifying high-risk zones demands coordination between scientists, agencies, and communities. And time is the one factor that cannot be paused. Every day, the ground continues its quiet shift. Every day, unseen changes accumulate. Until one day, somewhere out there in the open expanse of West Texas, the surface will dip just slightly more than expected. A fence line will tilt, a patch of earth will darken, and then, without ceremony, without warning, it will open. Another sinkhole. Another piece of land swallowed. Another reminder that what was left behind is no longer staying buried. This isn't just a geological issue, it's a legacy issue, a consequence of decades of extraction without a complete plan for what comes after. And now, after has arrived, not as a sudden disaster, but as a creeping reality, one that expands inch by inch, foot by foot, mile by mile, until it can no longer be ignored. Because the ground doesn't forget. It holds everything, every drill, every seal, every fracture, and when the pressure becomes too great, it lets go.